Thank you so much for tuning in to Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood. Okay. No, so we put our tree up last night, and which is the earliest we've done it. At least we usually do it like Thanksgiving night or the day after, but we did that yesterday. But as the day went on, ornaments got higher and higher. So like toddler Christmas hits different this year. It's just
sure
like
does.
nothing around the bottom, and it's so ugly. And then it took me all day to I feel like to get the rest of the stuff out, because as soon as I'd put something out, Weston would grab it and like put it back in the tote or play with it or like. So it was like all day. I was like trying to put our Christmas stuff up and then also like clean up behind him, because he's just going behind me and taking everything down. We have this like little village and like snow and things that I put out, and he's grabbing the cars and the animals and the houses. And last year he couldn't reach that stuff.
So. I know we're debating what to do, because Hannah's at the stage now that she'll be fine. She's curious, but she like understands. But Aubrey is like, she will pull that thing down on herself for sure. Try and stand up using it as like a support.
Oh, right. I was worried about Weston last year. He was just crawling in November, and so he was fine. He actually didn't really mess with it. But then also we were at my parents' house for a whole week or so, we weren't even home. But now it's like this year he's so curious, and I don't know. He was like had the little candles. They didn't have batteries in it, but he kept like jabbing me with it and then like chewing on it, and I'm like, this is not stressful at all.
That's adorable. Kids, man.
Yeah. But if you have any tips, I know I've seen people like roll wrap empty boxes and put it around the Christmas tree. I could just see him ripping them open, so I don't know if that's gonna work.
That's okay. You know what, I want to say that was like Hannah's favorite part, was just unwrapping presents. So like she didn't even care what's in them. So we just kept wrapping things over and over again. And she thought it was the best. She loved it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. And then I was telling you this off of like not recording, but Weston just realized where pee comes from. Like he just, because he accidentally peed, and he's like, oh, that was cool. So now he's like forcing himself to like pee. So we've been like going behind him and cleaning up like pee spots, because he thinks it's funny. But he doesn't want to sit on the toilet. He's like, nope.
Yeah.
No.
We're
not there yet. No, we're not. But that's new. Yeah, he peed on my foot. So
oh my god.
I took his diaper off, and I'm like, great. It's been a while since he's peed on me.
That's great. Just throwing like it back baby. For nostalgia purposes. You miss him peeing on you.
Yeah. It only happened twice, and it didn't happen to Ryan at all. He's like, he's never peed on me. I was like, I've opened that diaper and it just shoots out. They weren't kidding. For boys, they make these things called PTPs or something like that you put over
to keep out.
I mean, we never used it because they're so flexible. He would just kick it off with his foot when he was a baby, so it didn't really work that great. The idea was good, but it didn't work out for us.
That's really funny. Aubrey had a short stint of doing that. Like every time we would take her diaper off, she would pee, and we'd be like, seriously? Like, it's not been off for a second. Like, come on.
They just hits it, and they're like, ooh.
Yep.
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
We love it.
Nice.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Mom Jeans. We're just kind of rolling with this. So we're your host. I'm Danielle, and I'm a boy mom, obviously, because we're cleaning up pee everywhere. A stay-at-home mom and a military spouse.
And I'm Lisa, and I am a girl mom to 2 girls. So,
and Lisa, you're going to lead us off with an article today, but you wanted to recap last week's episode, right?
Yeah. So last week we had Kylie on, who moved from Australia to the US and then has 2 kids here now. And we were asking her, what was that decision like? Because she moved here before she had kids. So they obviously knew they were going to have kids eventually, but didn't know, the whole story of it. And I just wonder now for you, Danielle, like I know there was a chance that you guys would have been able to go to Germany or, been stationed somewhere. Do you think you could make that move now, having a kid, to another country, and it wasn't like it's like a contract where it's a year, a 2 year, it's 3 year, like just willy-nilly, like do you think you could do it?
I don't know. I'd like to think so because I do like adventure, and I there's a lot that I like about Germany, even though I've not been there. But or some place like that. I just think it would be neat to experience a different culture. It definitely would be hard for my side of the family, I feel like, because I do feel like Ryan's parents and family are just like, we'll come wherever you guys are and visit. But it is a little bit harder. My parents still work and part time, and so it's just a little tough. So I don't know. I would like to think yes that I would do it, but I don't know if we'd stay there forever. But I don't know. You might get there and we'd love it. So I don't know. Would you?
I like when Brandon's friend took the job in Sweden. They haven't moved yet. They're moving in February. I was like, we've always talked about doing it. But then I think when you're faced with the actual decision of to do it, it's like, man, is that the right decision? Like, I've been having a kind of a rough week or so because Hannah got into Aubrey's school, which we're so excited about because we've always wanted them to be at the same school. But Hannah's teacher essentially begged us to stay at her old place, and it was gut wrenching. Like, it was awful. I was a wreck. It was awful. And I'm like, I can't even go across the town. Like, do you think I could actually go to another country where don't know anybody, and it maybe possibly a different language, like there's so many components to it that you're like, I almost feel like if that opportunity came, I would be like, sign the papers as soon as we get the offer, so I don't have time to think about it, because we've always talked about wanting to do it. But it's tough too, because we feel like we have a community here in Flagstaff, and we're enjoying Flagstaff, and we're starting to get to that point where it's like we're connected, we know people, we have different people for different things, which is really nice to get to that point and to start all over again. Like, it's interesting. And Kylie made some interesting points about the age being a factor too.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be hard. I would much rather the military tell us we're moving there, because then we have no choice.
Yes.
So that takes the, well, should we or should we not, component out of it. But it's wild. Like, I have a friend, she lived here in Great Falls, and that's where I live, Montana, middle of nowhere. It's not. There's like 60,000 people here, but it does feel like a small town, like you say Flagstaff does. Yeah. But she grew up here her whole life, and she married someone from the base here, and they live in Colorado, and they just got orders to Egypt. And they're going to be living on an embassy. And I don't think there's very many other Americans living there. I think there's people from like Italy and all sorts of places like in this embassy. And so, yeah, she's trading the snow for pyramids. I'm like, I didn't even know you could go live in Egypt. So that's a pretty cool job.
Egypt.
Yeah. God.
That's an incredible change.
Yeah. And her son's like maybe 6 months. Like he's not a year old yet. Yeah. Wow. So.
How much longer does he have in the military, or is he planning on staying in for a while?
I think he's planning on staying in for a while. I don't know if he's been in. They're a little bit younger than me, so I think he's not been in as long. He's younger. So yeah, I don't know. They literally got married, and he moved, did a short tour. I don't know if it was Korea. It was somewhere overseas, Turkey, one of those places. So like they didn't even live together after they got married, and he was gone. So when I met her, her husband was gone, and because we worked together, and I was like, wow, that's so interesting. Yeah. And then their first time living together is like when he came back, and then they got pregnant. She didn't think she could get pregnant either. I'm just like, no, we don't know. I'm not saying her name, but yeah, she had PCOS, and so she also had a chemical pregnancy like I did, and then they were just going to go straight for some infertility treatment, get those testing started, and she ended up getting pregnant, and so she didn't have to do any of that.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was awesome.
That is awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine that. I can't imagine that. Wow.
No, Egypt, like I can't. Germany, I feel like I could do Germany, I could do Italy, like London or Europe, but Japan even. But Egypt sounds
like, far.
Yeah. It's scary. I don't know. Because I don't know. I don't know. So far away.
That's crazy. But, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. Like, I feel like if you were forced to do that, it's like, well, what are you going to do? It's not like you're going to just run away. Wow. That's really cool. I'll be interested to see, like, that'd be fun to talk to her after a while of living there and see what that's like.
Oh, yeah. We definitely should.
That'd be fun.
That would be. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think while he does that transition, she did decide to be like stay at home for now. And she's going to be moving back here for a few months with her mom while he's in training. And then they're going to move. So, and I don't know if they're going to put their stuff in storage. I guess so. And they have a dog that I think will have to stay with
for sure.
somebody's parent. Yeah.
Oh, that's tough.
So it's hard. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry if you can hear the helicopters. It's Wednesday night, and
I can never hear them at helicopters. That's so funny. I love that.
Yeah. If they fly over, it'll rattle my whole house. But
we get that too because they bring the ospreys up here a lot, and I literally am always terrified they're gonna fall. They're just gonna fall out of the sky and fall onto because I've heard they're unsafe. But it's like they also fly so low, and you're like, man. And we live so close to the airport that. They do their touch and goes and stuff, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah.
I get that way too. I know, again, this is random. We haven't even started our episode yet, but our topic. I remember after 9/11, and we have training, like jets fly over our house in Virginia. And I remember being like so scared because I was in 4th grade when that happened. And so it took a while to like not freak out when airplanes flew over. I still sometimes I'm like, that sounds low.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Ugh, I can't. We had that happen over us once in Illinois, and it was plane was being escorted down to the ground because there was an emergency on the plane. And I just remember, like, I was by myself at home, and I was like, oh my, like, what, this is it. This is the end. This is so scary. It's, loud noises. Not my jam.
Oh gosh. Last story, and we'll get started. I was at Myrtle Beach, and there's a Air National Guard somewhere near there in North Carolina, and they were doing training one night. And we saw them fly, and there was this like flares that went off, and I looked at my sister, and I was like, "This is it. This is the end of the world. We're dying." Like I thought it was aliens. I'm like, "This is it." But they were just doing training. But I was so scared because they did. It looked like I don't know what. It didn't even look like they were moving. It was almost looked like they hovered a little, and there was this like flares that went off, and it was the strangest thing. But it had to be training because then they flew away, and I'm like, well, that was weird. But I literally was like, man, today's the day. It wasn't. I love to see another day.
I think I told you I was on the Big Island when they accidentally hit the button to send emergency alerts that there was a nuclear missile incoming. And I was like,
that was scary.
Oh, it was so scary. And I was like, this is it. This is how I'm going down. All right. I mean, at least I'm in Hawaii.
Paradise.
Yeah, at least I was in a great place. But the best was everybody's like, well, they're not going to hit us. They're going to go for like Oahu or whatever. And so we'll just get the tidal wave. So you just have to like start running up the mountain. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like that's going to, like, you don't just run up mountains,
Take you a while.
It was a wild, like my heart was just racing. Like, wow, I don't know what even to do. But anyway, that was... All right. Well, hey, the two of us have had near-death experiences.
We made it.
We made it. Okay, so to get into what we're going to talk about today. So, unfortunately, Danielle and I were talking about this before. We keep getting paywalled. So, every article that I read, I forget that I can only read it once, sometimes not even any times, because it's behind New York Times or whatever, and I just don't care to pay for that stuff. But yeah, so I read this article and I kept being like, I should take screenshots while I'm reading this just in case it does a paywall thing, and I didn't do that. So I'm going to kind of just piece it together based on a different site I just found, but it talks about cycle breaking. So essentially, I'm gonna just like, let me see if I can find a quick definition of it, and then it is cycle breaking is essentially you it's bravely deciding to stand up against the status quo and the way that your family raised you and the way that you the values and things that your family raised you with, and then you deciding when you have a kid to break those norms that you grew up with that were very strong values maybe for your parents, and then now trying to explain to your parents why you're trying to break that cycle without offending them for the way that they raised you. Because I mean, we've seen the Instagrams where the mom's like, I guess I was a terrible mother because I let you eat Pop-Tarts every day, like all those ones and stuff like that. So it's interesting because paired with that, like, I think a lot of my news sources are all interconnected because I'm, in that algorithm. But I just listened to a podcast about breaking up with your parents, and they had a woman on there, and they were and to be fair, her mom, her dad disappeared. Like, he just ran off and never had contact with her and her brother. And then the mom was like, struggled with her own alcoholism and all this kind of stuff. And then she ended up putting her daughter into foster care for a year because she just couldn't handle her. And I think she was like 12 or 13 when that happened. And then she got her back the year later. But she's like, I broke up with my mom, and it was like the most relief I've ever felt in my life. And then the host turned on her and was like, okay, but you have a kid now. Well, what would you do if your kid did that to you? And she was like, I would be devastated. I would be totally heartbroken, and I would just completely lose it. And he's like, so do you not put the pieces together on that? And then at the end of the episode, they had parents who had been broken up with and how devastated they all are, and like not understanding the impact of that. So I think it's a very interesting whole big circle of cycle breaking, and why is that happening so much? Like, how do you, I'll start with a question. How do you think your parents parented compared to how they were parented? So were your grandparents, did your parents parent like your grandparents, do you think?
I mean, I think there were some aspects that they definitely did, for sure. But then also, I feel like they tried to break the cycle as best as they could as
Yeah.
well. Um, so, so I don't know my poppy as an alcoholic. He did not drink because they basically said, if you want to see your grandkids, you'll stop drinking, and he did.
Wow.
However, when my dad was younger, my poppy was an alcoholic. They were very poor. They had like rats in the house, like mice,
Wow.
but I rarely hear my dad like talk about those stories. He's always talking about the good times and like the fun times and the crazy things that they did with him and the siblings. But I think because of that, like they really overcompensated on like Christmas and things like that, on presents, because they didn't get much, and so I almost think we got too much. And I tell my parents, I'm like, y'all did way too much. And so now I see myself trying to like back off a little. Like, I don't want to go crazy for Christmas, because they like overcompensated. And then, my granddad was a little like key textbook, like narcissist a little. And so I'm trying to like kind of work through those things. I don't know if she's fully worked through them, but I can see like, okay, I understand why, like literally I'd have to have triangles in the carpet. We've talked about this on an earlier episode. Because my granddad needed everything perfect and clean and a little maybe OCD about how things needed to be. And so I can see that in my mom, and I'm trying to break that now too, because I get overwhelmed if my house is messy or not. Things aren't put back the way they should be or how I want them. And so I do see those things like generational and like where I'm trying to break it, because I know the pressure and the anxiety that I get from those things, and I don't want to put that on Weston. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of like went full circle there, but yeah. So I can definitely see how they did things differently, but then maybe some things the same. I'd say my parents got the switch, or the belt. I didn't get that, but I did get spanked, and then
same.
And that's a whole topic to like a whole controversy, I guess, but I will not and don't want to continue that. I want to find other ways, consequences that are more effective, I feel like. So am I mad at my parents that spanked me? No. It's a different generation. Do I think it caused anxiety a little bit? Yes. So, yeah. If my parents listen to this, I do love you guys, and I do not hold that against you. Like, I definitely deserved it. It's just different times.
It's funny that you say that, because I went to go clip something about like talking about my mom saying weird things, and I was like, oh man, she's gonna get so upset when she hears that, because like she has a lot of guilt of how she parented, and it's like weird to me because like, so my mom's mom was very clean, like not a thing out of place at her house. My mom's house was always a mess. Like and I think a lot, and she always said that, she's like, I couldn't stand that we always had to have everything perfect. Like my grandma had a room, they lived in the same house for 60 years. They had a room that nobody was allowed to be in. I think by the time I was like 25, I'd been in that room once, and we went to her house all the time. But it's just like, she was so clean and neat. And, it's such an interesting thing, like growing up where, like there were times where my room growing up was humongous. Like it was a humongous room, and I would have clothes. You couldn't see a square inch of my floor because there were clothes everywhere. And my mom would be like, she worked with like the fire department. She's like, if the fire department comes in here, they're going to trip and fall and not be able to save you. So I would make this little narrow path so that they could come in, and she would be like, like it's a losing battle to fight a teenager on that kind of stuff. But yeah, like it's interesting. And my grandma had like, back then they would never address it, but terrible anxiety. And I would say towards the end of her life, definitely depression. And like she was the biggest guilter. She would guilt the heck out of you, which was really hard. And my mom would do it, but she was like 50% better than my grandma. And then like a worrier. Oh my gosh, my grandma was a worrier times 1 trillion. She was afraid of everything. Like they bought a lake house. My grandparents bought a lake house, but my grandma didn't know how to swim. And she was terrified of the lake. Terrified of like, and her kids like growing up lived on the lake. Like they were always on the boat, always. And she had to just been a wreck waiting for them to always come back, Yeah. And my mom was like that too. And that's a big thing. Like I really want to make sure. And I try really hard. Like I to a very, very low scale. I grew up like afraid of bugs and worms and animals and all that. So then now I'm like trying to hide my fear of those things when Hannah gets close to them, because I'm like, I don't want her to be like afraid. And sometimes I think I go too extreme to be different than my upbringing, which my parents did a great job. They did the best they could. Same thing. Like you look at it now and you're like, all right, that probably caused a little bit more anxiety than it needed to, but they didn't know, they tried their best and all that. So I think it is interesting to think about cycle breaking. And like, I know we've talked about this before, but like some of the stuff that I really strongly believe in, my parents and my in-laws are like, you are nuts. Like, why are you so adamant on this? Like, mostly it's food. Like, I
same.
really want my kids to have healthy habits. And like Hannah loves ice cream. So Brandon got those like little cups. Do you remember those little cups when you were a kid, and they like have little chocolate swirls in them or strawberry swirls in them? So he bought those the other day, and Hannah's like, she wants to eat like 1,000 of them in a row. And I'm like, yeah, like, and I keep trying to tell her, and I'm like, I know they don't suggest this, but I'm like, that's going to make your tummy, it could make your tummy hurt. It's not great for your tummy. And she's like, I don't care. Give me the ice cream. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah. That doesn't work, does it?
Like, that means nothing to me right now.
It means nothing. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with the food. My parents, I think Ryan's parents do that. Ryan's parents don't say anything though. Mine are more vocal about, like, you ate that stuff and you're fine.
Yes.
There might be a possibility that we might live with my parents for like a couple months during Skillbridge. We'll see. But that's the biggest fear is the boundaries, the crossing the boundaries with the food. Like, I'll buy the food if you just feed Weston this food. Like, if, let's say I'm out doing something, because I've considered, like, if we do that, maybe I'll sub or do something to make a little extra cash because my mom's not working. I was like, nice. But that does not mean you can take him to McDonald's or any of the fast food restaurants around town. Like, so that's the hardest part.
That's a huge struggle for me. Like, my mom makes an effort to support my craziness of food. And she actually, like, sometimes I'll make the recipes for her from Yummy Toddler Food. And my mom's like, this is so good. And I'm like, yeah, make it. You know, like, take care of yourselves, because they don't eat well. And neither do my in-laws. And my in-laws just don't care what I say. Like, that drives me bonkers. Like, can't you respect me? Like, I just don't understand that. Well, you know, you guys all had it and you were fine. Like, let us be grandparents where we're the fun ones and let them eat the things they want. And I'm like, yeah, but like, it's just not good for them. Like, I was thinking about it the other day. Like, we're having a girls' night tomorrow night. We're having our white elephant, and I like bought these, or I'm making these really like chocolate covered pretzels with Rice Krispies on them. And I'm like, that is not something I eat my normal life. And I was like starting to beat myself up about it. And I was like, this is silly. Like, 6 days out of 7, we eat great. Like, we eat healthy, organic, whatever foods, you know, but it's hard. I mean, I start to think about like, okay, our parents have been doing this for how many years, eating the way they do, like, to now go and say, hey, you know, I'm not telling you not to eat whatever you want, but it is hard when you're eating, you know, chips and dip, and then Hannah's like, I want some. Well, of course she's going to want some if she sees you doing it. So that's the battle, is like, you know.
Right. No, I agree. That's tough. So I will say that's another thing that I'm like breaking is the food that we eat. We don't have soda in our house. Like, we always had soda. And little Debbie cakes. Man, I loved a good zebra cake. Those are my favorite.
Zebra cakes are so good.
I know. And it's like, I hadn't had one of those in forever. Because knowing what you know, you can't unknow it. I guess ignorance was bliss back then. And I'd love Pop-Tarts. I eat them every day. But it's just like, I can't let myself do it. Or I'll feel bad. I'll get a headache.
I had Pop-Tarts recently because, like, I would only eat s'mores Pop-Tarts. Like, I could not do blueberry. I couldn't do any of the other flavors except for s'mores. S'mores had to have been the worst ones you could possibly get. And I had one.
Those were my least favorite.
Oh, I loved them. And I had that one, like, I'd say within the last 5 to 10 years. It's not recent. And I was like sick to my stomach the whole day. And I was like looking at the back of the box. I was like, 56 grams of sugar in one Pop-Tart. Okay, yeah, that's probably, that's a great reason why my tummy hurts. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you eat the whole pack? Did you eat 2?
Of course I did.
Yeah.
I have no self-control.
Yeah. Which I didn't know that until I went to college.
Oh, isn't that ridiculous?
Took my nutrition class. Yeah. I was
Don't put 2 in a pack and then they give me my serving size of 1.
Yeah. In 2020, the FDA changed the the labels to make it
Mm-hmm.
easier to read. And Pop-Tart was one where it shows if you eat one or if you eat two.
Yep.
So, and same with ice cream. If you eat the whole pint versus like the serving size, which I
I
think was
love
like
that.
1/4 of a cup.
I mean, I
So,
love it and I also hate it. I will tell you, when they started putting calorie counts on like chain restaurant menus, I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
see ya.
no.
I'll never. I mean,
I was like, man.
that's what I always said. Like, go. Like, I remember, it was a long time ago that they did that, because I think they put the calorie counts on a margarita, and the margarita was like 1,800 calories, and I was like,
Oh no.
1,800 calories for a margarita. That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big, food is a big one. Like, we talk about it. My mom is about to turn 69 years old, and she is obsessed with her weight. And it is like,
My mom too.
that's
Every time I talk to her,
hard.
she's like, I need to lose 20 pounds. I'm
Yeah.
like, Mom, you've been saying this since I was like 10 or
Yeah.
2. I don't even know. Like,
Yeah.
why?
My
Just
mom
eat
was a
healthy and move your
wild,
body.
right? My mom was a
Yeah.
wild yo-yo dieter, like
Mhm.
always like dieting. Oh, she lost a bunch of weight, so now she can eat however she wants again. And it was like up and down, up and down. It was
Yeah.
crazy. And like, I look back at pictures of her when she was really like, oh, I'm so fat and I need to lose all this weight. And she was so skinny, like so skinny. And
Yeah.
then, it's just like that's a big thing I would love to break the cycle on, for sure, is the body image thing. But it's like, when you've been like, I've been ingrained with that for my entire life, it's like, to try to catch yourself before you say it. Like, there are so many times when I'm talking to Hannah and I'm about to say something and I'm like, walk back, walk back, walk back. I don't want to say what I was about to say. And she always goes, what were you going to say, Mommy? And I'm like, and then you like try to get on your toes to try to like think of something quickly to not say what you were going to say. It's hard.
I know, it's so tough. It took me a long time to get out of like the body image phase. Like I say 30s have been my best years, because like my whole 20s I worried I would like just force myself to exercise because I thought I needed to look a certain way. I wouldn't like eating certain things. I was counting my macros and like my calories, and it was just like too much. And now I look back on the times that I thought like I would say like, oh, I'm fat. I'm like, man, I was like, I had some muscle and I was like skinny. And now I feel like I'm fine. I'm at a good place with that. I have been like struggling with anxiety and all sorts of stuff, but with weight and with my image, I think after being a mom, it's just like having a baby. I'm just like, it is what it is. And
yeah,
I don't know. I don't have time to think about it, but I do feel like I'm in a better spot, which I'm glad, because it took a long time to unravel that. Because I know I've said this before in a previous podcast, but my grandma and my mom both were so hard on themselves and still are. Mm-hmm. My grandma's 80 and still says like, she's like, oh, I'm ugly and I'm fat. I'm like, Grandma, no, you're not. Like, but it's tough. And it's like, okay, I don't know. My mom would apologize for eating cupcakes or like a cake. I'm like, Mom, stop. Like, enjoy your cupcake without any stress. Like, why are you apologizing to me? Like,
isn't that so hard? It's like, but you're choosing to eat that, so you got to let it go, right? Like, right. But it's interesting, because I was just listening to a podcast about. I listen to a lot of podcasts, if you could tell. But I was listening to a podcast about how breast reductions are becoming a lot more popular. They're not obviously to the level of getting implants, but they're becoming more and more popular. And they were talking about, I think it's Gen Z is really big on, if you don't like it, fix it. Whereas I think I'm a millennial, and they taught us, love your body. Love your body no matter what it is. Just love yourself, love your body, love you. And I'm like, oh, that's such an interesting thing to think, like, oh, if I was just born in the next generation, like I would have gone and gotten my reduction. And now I'm like, okay, there's so many components to it. Like, do I teach my girls that, oh, if you don't like it, you can just go fix it, or is it, it's hard. It's a hard thing to think about.
I think I'd be still on the side of love your body. Like, yeah, but I get it. I've had friends that had breast reductions because like they were like a big size and it hurt their back and it was uncomfortable, and like I totally get that. Sometimes I even think I don't want like implants or anything, but maybe when I'm done having kids, like just a lift would be nice.
Yeah.
But I heard that's more expensive than getting breast implants. I'm like, why?
I
don't know.
know. I don't understand
So,
it. Like that's what the podcast was like. A lot of insurance will not cover reductions, and I'm like, that's crazy to me because I do get like such terrible tension headaches because of the weight, like on my shoulders, literally on my shoulders, hold from my bras holding up, and I'm like,
yeah,
like you think that all of the other problems that come with it, you would. It's insurance. You know, what are you going to say
right.
about that? It's a business. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
It is.
Yeah. But going back to when you were saying like your parents worry, that's another thing that I'm trying to like do differently because I think my grandma worried, my mom worries still. She'll send me articles of like grizzly bear attacks in Montana. And I'm like, that's so rare. It's so rare for it to happen. Like,
Yeah.
yes, it happens, but also like I went and got my like diving certificate, and so I can
Nice.
like do scuba diving, and so I've done a lot of things, but you know, in the back of my head, I'm like, should I be scared? Because she's like, be careful. There's barracudas. There's this. So anything I say I'm going to do, like ski, you could break your leg. And
Yeah.
so I want Weston to be brave and try different things and do those things. But yeah, part of me is like, no, I don't want him to scuba dive because there's so much things can go wrong. But
Oh man.
it's just trying to find that like balance. But then also, I feel like it's like my mom instilled fear in me, but however, I do feel like if I'm going out by myself, I'm not going anywhere by myself, like Walmart, going out to Walmart or Target and it's dark out. I'm like always watching my back. I'm like checking my surroundings. Like, so I feel like that's important. So like, had she not instilled any fear in me, then I might be
Yes.
like
Overly
blind to the fact
confident.
that, yeah.
Yep.
So
That's
you
an
gotta find that
interesting
balance.
thing. That's
Yeah.
a really good point too, because 2 points on that. One, like Hannah will talk to anybody. Like she walks up to people all the time and is like, "What's your name?" And they always think it's the funniest thing, and I'm like, I love it because it's really like it's awesome that she's that confident and sure of herself. I love that. But
Yeah.
same thing. You're like, all right, well, you can't trust everybody. I listened to another podcast that was like, you know, there was like I think it was in the 80s that they were like really focused on like the kids on the milk carton. These kids are missing, and they really freaked people out. So the kids don't play outside by themselves anymore, all that kind of stuff. And they were like, you know, the chances of that really happening are so rare, and a lot of times they aren't random. Like it's somebody who knew somebody, or it is a relative that does that stuff. Like, and that actually gave me a lot of peace because I was like, you know, I'm like so worried about that. Like for some reason the other day, you know, I haven't had a lot of those like spiraling mind things that we've talked about where you're like, oh, a car is going to jump up on the curb and, you know, like kill us, whatever. But I had one yesterday while I was giving Aubrey a bath, and I was like I kind of like glazed over while I was like playing out the scenario of being murdered, and Aubrey was stuck in the bath and the water was still running and the drain was cut, and then she's going to drown, you know, it was like ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But I was like trying really hard to like make sure they didn't know I was freaking out in my mind, because it's like how can I help them not get to that point, you know? It's really hard. Like my mom, like I've talked about before, my mom didn't really have a lot of friends, and certainly not friends she felt like she could talk to about like my dad or what was going on. So she talked to me a lot about the stuff. And so I always knew when she was worried. And so then I was always worried because she was worried. Like to this day, my brother went to a party in LA this weekend, and I texted Brandon and I was like, Brandon, it's 10 a.m. I haven't heard from Dan. I talk to my brother all the time. Like I text him after I know he's going out, and I'm like, hey, how was the party? Or like I ask him some random question that has nothing to do with anything just to get him to respond. And Brandon's like, Lisa, he's 36 years old. You got to stop doing this. 35. And you have to stop doing this, like worrying about him. I'm like, that was my entire childhood. It was like, I was his second mom because my mom knew I was like closer to him than she was. So I always had to watch him, and I'm like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I want the girls to watch out for each other, but I don't want them to be like me,
Right. Well, just ask him to share his location. My sister and I share our location.
I have tried, Danielle. I've tried, and he's like, absolutely not. I will never do that for you. And I'm like,
why? Sometimes
Dan.
I'll check just randomly to see what my sister's doing. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, she's at home, so she can answer.
Yes.
I'll call her.
Yep. I think I'm gonna do it on my parents' phones when I see them this weekend, because I'm like starting to get to that point where I feel like they're like, my dad will, something will happen and my mom will have no idea where he is, and I'm like, yeah, let's just nip this in the bud before it gets to be a problem. So
yeah, Ryan and I just started sharing our location,
really,
because he went hunting. Yeah, I mean, because we never really needed it before, and to be honest, I didn't even know you could do it until my sister made me like share my location with her. Yeah. So he was going hunting. I was like, all right, well, just share my location or your location. I was like, I'll share mine, in case I go missing. So if I do go missing randomly, he's going to forget that we have our location shared. So just remind him to check his phone to see where I'm at.
It's so convenient. I'll tell you that. Like, we turned ours on when I was pregnant with Hannah, because I would go hiking by myself a lot. And I was like 8.5 months pregnant, and Brandon's like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm like, you're not cutting me off from my hiking. And he's like, yeah, we'll turn our location on. And now it's nice because it saves a phone call where it's like, oh, all right, I can see where he's at. He'll be home in 10 minutes instead of, whatever, not knowing. Yeah, it's kind of like, there was a Black Mirror. Have you ever seen Black Mirror? Those shows?
No, but I know what you're talking about, yes.
Yeah, so there was a Black Mirror episode basically about like that, of like, you're always knowing what your kids are doing and having cameras on them and seeing what they're doing and ruining their lives for that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to get that far. I don't want to do that, but no.
Yeah. Ryan asked the question the other day. He's like, when do we take the camera out of his room? What age? What would you say?
I Googled that because I was like, yeah, at what point is that like inappropriate to do? Right. I guess it's dependent obviously on the kid, but I think it said like 4 years old. But I know people who have had theirs much longer than that. Like, and I think like it's interesting because Hannah, we just made her bed a fort, so the camera, you can't even see her now. Oh, and like we used to be able to see her, and like now I'm like, oh, is she still in there? Somebody come and go grab her. Is she like doing okay in there? Yeah, it is weird.
I guess you could always move the camera like outside, maybe in the hall or something.
Yeah.
Like, that way you can just, if they did leave, see where they kind of went. I don't know. Yeah. I told Ryan, I was like, I feel like we have a false sense of security. He's like, I don't have a false sense of security. I'm like, yes, we do. We literally left the garage open all night last night. Mm-hmm. We'll leave the car doors unlocked, and you can just hit the garage button. The doors, like, we do. We live on base, and like, we're not remembering to do this stuff. I'm like, we'll have to remember when we move off base. I mean, not saying like not everyone is great and perfect on base. That's not the case. You have your disputes and all sorts of stuff, break-ins, but rarely. Yeah. So I'm like, we have to do all these things, and I don't have a ring or anything of that. I'm like, we're getting outside cameras. I don't know how I feel about them in the house. Like, the camera I have for Weston isn't one that records or you can get on your phone. I'm not there yet. But we'll see. We'll see how I feel when we move.
It's kind of scary. So Hannah had this like sound machine, and I was like hearing voices in it, and it was like a white noise, but it was the net. I think it's a Nest. No, not a Nest. I don't know. It's Hatch. There you go.
Yeah,
it was a Hatch, and I was like so creeped out because I was like, is that her camera or is it like what's happening? I kept telling Brandon, I'm like, I'm hearing things, and he's like, he started to hear them, and he's like, I'm hearing babies crying, and I'm like, I know. So we were like, we thought it was Aubrey when we were in there, and we're like, oh my gosh, why isn't whoever was putting Hannah to bed, the other one wasn't going to get Aubrey? Like, why aren't you going to get Aubrey? She's crying. And she's not crying. And I'm like,
oh wow,
it was so creepy. So I got rid of that thing so fast because I was so creeped out by it. But same thing with the cameras. Like, that's creepy. It's creepy. Like, it's creepy to think people can tap into your cameras if they really want to. And you're like, well, yours, not mine. You can. And I'm like, oh, it really bothers me.
Yeah. Ryan wouldn't let me have an Alexa or anything in our house. We have nothing.
Yeah.
Though we have our cell phones, I feel like they're
I
listening all the
know.
time. I watch. What does it matter? But
You know
yeah.
what's ridiculous? I was at the post office today and I left my phone in the car and I ran in, and this girl was wearing these adorable joggers, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I love your joggers." And she's like, "Oh, they're," and she said the brand name, and I was like, "Oh, perfect. My phone will pick up what it was cuz I forgot." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I didn't have my phone on
Oh
me." So
no.
now, well, now I'll get it cuz my phone's next to me and we're talking about
Yeah.
it. I'm sure they'll come up, but I was like, that's scary that I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll figure it out when they advertise me." Like, wow, how creepy
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah. Have you ever just thought something and it shows up and you're
Oh,
like,
yes. So
that they're
creeped out by that.
I know.
So
It's
creeped out by
wild.
that. Yeah, I feel like it's an interesting component too of like breaking the cycle, because the information that we have in
Yeah.
comparison. Like I remember I was with my cousin who has her daughter just turned 2, so she's almost a year younger than Hannah. But we went on vacation with our parents as like a big family trip, and my aunt and my mom were talking about how they hate that we never call our moms for advice. We call each other for parenting
Oh yeah.
advice, and they're like, we would. They always called their parents. They all like if something like you think your kid's sick, like what do you do, mom? Like all this, and we have Google, we have each other, we
Yeah.
have, and that I think part of that was like, oh, we think we can do it better. And I've gotten to the point where I've like come full circle and I'm like, all right, I'll call my mom and see,
Yeah.
what she's doing. So, or like what she
Right.
thinks about things. But
That's tough. Yeah. My mom usually says take Tylenol and uh alternate it with ibuprofen. I'm like, no, I
yep.
want to do something different.
Yeah.
But I have like when I do have to use Tylenol because I'm afraid that his fever got too high or something, it comes right down because I never use it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just like things like that I want to do differently just because,
They've
we
done
know what we
studies.
know. And
Yeah,
yeah,
we know
it's
what we
like,
know. I know that's
right.
always my favorite, like my favorite point of like, well, you guys are fine. You did these
Yeah.
things and you were fine. And I'm like, we were slash are fine, but we could have been better.
Yeah.
If there was
Yeah.
anything I could do to make them better, wouldn't you want that?
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not dogging on you just because I have the ideas I have. I'm
Right.
just telling you
Hmm.
this is how I'm choosing to do this.
Yeah. For
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It
It's
was.
I
That is.
Yeah, I will reference this article, but though when I'm on the therapyden.com, and this one's called Here's What It Means to Be a Cycle Breaker in Your Family. And I kind of skimmed this one because the initial article that I read, again, like I said, was behind a paywall. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting to be able to give your parents grace, whereas some people are just like, I'm just not putting up with it. And I think, unfortunately, politics have wedged people pretty badly and their parents pretty badly. Um, and like I've talked to my brother about that. Like I am just not going to let that come between us. Like
Yeah.
I love my parents despite whatever differences we can have, and I appreciate the fact that they did the best that they could as parents. I don't
Yeah.
want to do all of those things, but some of those things, like they showed me unconditional love. Like I think that is something that I can absolutely strive to get to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, my dad and my mom like taught me like never to give up. I mean, I feel like I've given up on stuff, but like, I try. I don't know. My dad was definitely the dad that's like, get up, dust it off, walk it off. And I
Yep.
did. And I feel like I'm stronger for it. And,
Yep.
I wasn't coddled or anything. So it's just like, yeah, finding that balance too. Like, I don't want to like coddle Weston, but I do want to give him cuddles. But also, I want him
Oh
to
yeah.
be strong and independent and like be able to face adversity and you know, um, things that come his way and just know that he can overcome those things. And I do feel like my parents like helped me with that, along the way. And so,
That's
but
a really cool point too. Like we did that really well with Hannah. Like, if you fall down, what do you do? And like every time now she falls down, she's like, I get up. We like die because she doesn't cry. She doesn't like, Mommy, I fell. I got up. And I'm like, you're so awesome. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But we're struggling with Aubrey because I think we have definitely coddled her a bit too much. Like, even her teachers are like, so she's about to move up to the toddler class and they will not pick her up when she's crying like that. And I'm like, oh, my baby. But we perpetuated that problem by picking her up every time she cried. And now it's like, oh, yeah, this is the consequences of that. So I've got two kids totally opposite ends of the spectrum of like, oh yeah, okay, we gotta work on this with Aubrey so that she's not constantly crying to be picked up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's the baby and will always be the baby, so
she's always gonna be my baby.
Yeah.
That's right.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But I guess I get it because it's like, you're last and you just want to soak it all up.
Oh, and she's like a cuddler to the max. Like she wants to be inside your bones. If she could get as close inside of you, she would. And like, she'll grab onto your neck and hold you, and she'll even like pat your back because you do it to her, and she'll pat back. And yeah, Hannah was like always like, put me down, let me go, and so it's very, very fun.
That's Weston. He'll like give you cuddles if he's not feeling good or early in the morning or like right before you lay him down. But a lot of times he's like, put me down. And then if he does want to be picked up, then he also wants to be put down, but then wants to be picked up again. And so it's like this vicious cycle. And I'm like, great. He's got my indecisiveness. Like, he can't decide. Like, he's got FOMO. I want this, but I want this also, but I don't want it
all.
Yeah. So I'm like that. And then he's got my husband's like he's very ornery. Like, you'll tell him to do something or not to do something. He's going to do it. Anyways, or vice, my husband's the same way. I'm like, hey, you should try it this way, and he'll do it like the complete opposite of what you said, just to spite you. Like,
just to spite you, yeah.
I'm like, why? Where do you get that from?
Yeah, I have a toddler and a husband like that. I'm on your page. That's hard.
I know. I was like, you need to work through that so we can figure out how to teach Weston to like
not do that. To listen. I don't know, man. If you can figure out, like, we went through such a rough beginning of Hannah's tantrums, and then she got so good, and now she's back to that again. And I was talking to a mom who has much older kids, and she was like, oh, it's the cycles. You're going to go through them. Like, you think it's great. They're doing well, and then they just snap back into that routine again for a while, and you're like, oh, what can you do? You just kind of ride it out. But
yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, I'm sure it never ends. Even when they're adults, probably they're going to like make great decisions and then they're going to make poor decisions.
Oh, yeah. So, just like us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I like I said, I don't want to rush where they're at now because I really enjoy it. But I am excited to kind of see them develop and learn and see where they are in 10, 15, 20 years, It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yep. Yes. All right. Anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, I could always keep talking, but
I know, same.
Yeah.
But I think we're good. I think that was a fun topic. If anybody out there has anything to tell us, what have you cycle broken and what have you kept with what you grew up with? Because I think it's okay to appreciate the things that you have because of your parents, but also understand that they taught you some things that you don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be interesting. Yeah, to hear for sure. Because I was just thinking, I feel like I asked Ryan about his family and he was like, nothing, everything's great. And my family were like, they're the complete opposites. Not in like a bad way, just we're from different worlds, and it's just interesting to how we grew up versus like we would yell at each other mad. And
same.
And so his parents didn't, and so that was interesting to learn how to have an argument, but like
quietly.
I don't know. Yeah.
Quiet resolution.
Yes. To resolve it.
It's weird listening to Bryce talk about their upbringing. He's like, I have nothing to say. Like he's like, you know, like my parents were like, oh, you got a B? Did you try? And they're like, yep, I tried. And it's like, wow. And like Michaela will talk about her dad, and she's like, I got a 98% and nobody else got an A. And my dad would be like, well, what about the other 2%? It's like, oh man, I'm so glad I didn't live in that family, right? That would be really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard.
No, I got my dad would give me $10 for every A.
Oh, cool.
And if I got a C, though, I got my CD player taken away. It only happened once.
Oh,
never
that's
again.
Awesome. Yeah. Not my CD player.
I know. Not Britney Spears.
Not Britney. Oh, I love it. It's so interesting too. Like my parents were on the total opposite spectrum of like how to treat school. Like my mom was like, get good grades. And my dad was like, you're only there for the social reasons. It doesn't matter what your grades are. And it was like such a weird thing for them to be on totally opposite pages there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They always wanted me to like make good grades and do well in school for sure. And they were never like, if I did make a bad grade, it was like, well, what did you do? I'd be like, oh, but the teacher, no, like, I don't know. Times have changed. Maybe in a teacher, it would just, you don't get that a lot. Like the parents are like, okay, well, how can my kid do better versus like, what did you do wrong as a teacher that my kid got this grade? But that's a whole other topic. But
yeah.
Anyways.
Well, good. I think in the weeks coming, we'll have we'll have to find a fun topic for the holidays again. And then my friend Katie is going to come on talking about leaving the full-time job force to raise kids. I'm excited for that one.
I can't wait.
For all of us, because I think we're all in that boat. I went to part-time work. She went to contract work. Freelance contract work, so she kind of makes her own schedule, and then you're stay-at-home momming, the hardest of them all. So
thank you. I know sometimes
combo.
I wish I had another skill set to like do something on the side. I'm just not there yet.
This is it. We just have to find a way to monetize it.
Right. Yeah. Right. If you want to sponsor us.
I mean, like within reason, we probably don't want like a bad person sponsoring us.
No.
Cool.
So that'd be fun.
All right. Well, come back and join us next week. We look forward to seeing you. Comment on our socials and engage with us so we know what you want to hear and hear us talk about, because we would love to talk about that.
Yes. Yeah. We want to talk about something you want to listen to, or else you're just going to keep hearing us talk about
whatever comes out.
Yep.
But we do appreciate you listening. Like, keep listening, please.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye. And that wraps up another episode of Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood. Thank you again so much for listening to us. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider giving us 5 stars so other mothers out there like you can find us and listen. If you would like, you could follow us on any of our socials at Mom Jeans, the podcast. If you have questions, would like to send us your birth story, or give us suggestions or things that you would like to hear, please email us at hello@momjeansthepodcast.com. See you next week.